All right, we're live on Facebook, we're live on YouTube. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Outlandish Talmud Stories and Outstanding Life Lessons, Part 10, titled The Best Teacher for Your Child. The new school year is coming up. What kind of school do you choose for your children? What kind of teachers do you want to have for your children? What are your goals for your children's learning in school? What do you want them to learn? What do you want them to become? These are some of the big questions that parents are always faced with, or grandparents were faced with, or those that want to become parents should be thinking about, because they're very, very important here. You only get one childhood in life, and we do it the best that we can. We can never be perfect as parents, but we should be talking about and thinking about and challenging ourselves to make conscientious decisions on behalf of our children, because they rely on us. So I want to study with you tonight quite an outlandish story, as we always do, with some really profound lessons that shape the paradigm of, from the Talmud's perspective, what should education look like? What is the ideal model teacher? And what's the teacher-student relationship? And what should a student be doing to learn best? So I hope you've downloaded the source sheet. You have the links on YouTube and Facebook. And we're studying a passage of Talmud. It's from Talmud Bava Metzia 85b. Let's get started right away. There's a lot I want to try to accomplish. Reish Lakish. Okay, we've met Reish Lakish before. Brother-in-law, a colleague of Rabbi Yochanan. He's the person that used to be a bandit, used to be involved in the Roman circuses, and then we learned the story how he came back to the Bet Midrash and became a great sage himself. So one of the things he used to occupy himself with, so the Talmud says he was marking the burial caves of the sages. So throughout history, many sages were buried, whether it's in Israel or in Babylon or other places where they lived. And it wasn't like today, unfortunately, or I'm not sure how well they were marked with tombstones or wherever, how organized the cemeteries were. And you can imagine also over time, history and persecution and destruction all took its toll. And so a lot of that, we didn't know who buried where and where are people buried. And it's so important to be able to identify that. Like, one of the big things we've been doing since the Holocaust is going to all Jewish cemeteries and restoring them and trying to figure out who's buried where and where are people buried. And especially here, one of the concerns of Reish Lakish was that if you step on a burial site, it imparts a level of tumah, a level of impurity. So, he couldn't mark everyone's grave because probably he was unable to. It's a bit too much, but at least he wanted to identify the graves of the sages, because they were such great sages and they were such holy people and did so much good for the community in their lifetime. He wanted to spare them the trouble, or spare them the issue of them imparting tumah, imparting impurity to somebody who did not know where their grave was and would step on their grave. So he's putting special markings on all the graves and he's finding all of them. However, when he arrived at the cave of Rabbi Chia, he's going to be the topic of tonight's class, and we're going to learn a lot about him. Rabbi Chia lived in the 1st, 2nd century. He was one of the Amoraim. After the close of the Mishnah and the close of the Tanaitic period begins the Amoraic period. Rabbi Chia is 2nd, 3rd, maybe 1st, 2nd generation of the Amoraim. So when Reish Lakish is looking for the grave of Rabbi Chia, the precise location of his grave eluded him. Couldn't find it. He's the only one that he can't find. Reish Lakish became distressed because he said to himself he was apparently unworthy of finding the grave. Why was he able to find everyone else's but not Rabbi Chia's? So he turned to God and he said, Ribono shel olam, Master of the universe, did I not analyze the Torah like Rabbi Chia? Am I undeserving that I should be given the privilege of finding Rabbi Chia's grave, being able to find it, to mark it, to pray there, to connect with the great teacher, the great scholar Rabbi Chia? So a divine voice emerged. He heard it, his soul heard it, he got a message. And it said to him, you did analyze the Torah like him, but you did not disseminate Torah like him. the Hebrew word is a little better than the English word. The Hebrew word is pilpul. It's hard to find a good English translation for pilpul because it's really an exercise that is done in Judaic studies and Talmudic studies. I'm not sure if this kind of exercise is done to that extent in secular studies. It's more than just analysis. Pilpul is when you take a passage of Torah and you break it down into pieces and you dissect it and you go deep, deep, deep. And you could spend a day, a month, a year on a subject exploring the ins and outs and the themes and the logic behind it and extrapolating and building a whole mountain from an idea. That's called pilpul, which is a very common exercise in many schools and many yeshivot. So God tells Reish Lakish, you are engaged in pilpul like Rebekah was, but however, you're not engaged in disseminating Torah. In Hebrew, the word is marbitz. We're going to visit this word a bit later. You want marbitz Torah like he was. How was Rebekah uniquely marbitz? How did he uniquely disseminate Torah? So the Gemara relates a story. One of Rebekah's colleagues was Rabbi Chanina. Now, they were friends, but they were very different, and they often debated with each other, as great sages do, with a lot of love, of course, as we've learned before. When Rabbi Chanina and Rabbi Chia would debate matters of Torah, Rabbi Chanina would say to Rabbi Chia, do you think you can debate me? You think you can outwin me? Heaven forbid. If the Torah were forgotten from the Jewish people, heaven forbid, I could restore it with my powers of analysis and intellectual acumen. Rabbi Chanina was boasting, probably in a holy way. He had incredible skill for pilpul, incredible skill for being able to deeply get to the heart and soul, the core of a matter, and build a whole intellectual construct from his studies. So he was so brilliant in his mental acrobatics, he said, if Torah would become forgotten, remember there was no printing press, there were no books, so it was all passed on by tradition. And if due to an Chas v'shalom, to think about a scenario where there was persecution and exile and dispersion of the people, and Torah is forgotten, he says, I can personally rebuild the Torah. I can personally reconstruct the whole Torah with the skill of my mind. Rabbi Chia said to Rabbi Chanina, do you think you can debate me? You can't compare yourself to me, as I'm acting to ensure that the Torah will not be forgotten by the Jewish people. You think you can rebuild the Torah if it's forgotten. I'm actually ensuring that it never will be forgotten. So I'm a step ahead of you, and I'm greater than you. How was Rabbi Chia ensuring that the Torah should never be forgotten? Remember, many challenges faced the Jewish community, like I said earlier. How did he make sure? So the Talmud, Rabbi Chia explains what he was doing. These are his activities. He elaborated. What do I do to this end? Listen carefully. I go and sow flax seeds and twine nets with the flax. And then I hunt deer with those nets. And I feed and I slaughter them. And I feed their meat to orphans. So I give charity. Next, I prepare parchment from their hides. And I write the 5 books of the Torah on those parchments. I go to a city to teach 5 children the 5 books, 1 book per child. Then I teach 6 other children the 6 orders of the Mishnah. So the 5 books are the Mosaic Code, are the Chamisha Chumshei Torah, the 5 books of the Torah that we have, which is the written law. And then we have the 6 orders of the Mishnah, which is the corpus of the oral tradition of the rabbinic tradition. So the 6 orders are Zra'im, Moed, Nashim, Nizikin, Kachim, Ta'arot, the 6 orders of the Mishnah. So I teach 5 kids each a book of the Torah, 6 kids each an order of the Mishnah, and I say to them, until I return and come back here, because I have other places to do the same thing, read each other the Torah and teach each other the Mishnah. This is how I act to ensure that the Torah will not be forgotten by the Jewish people. That's a very elaborate exercise. It was a one-man show. It wasn't Rebekah going to a farm, hiring somebody to breed his deer, to catch it, and then hiring a slaughterer, and hiring someone to skin it, and hiring someone to prepare those skins into hides, and then hiring a scribe. It wasn't none of that. Rabbi Chia did a one-man show from A to Z, from purchasing the land, to plowing the land, to sowing the flax seeds, to growing the flax, to making the nets, to hunting the deer, etc., until he could write those books of Torah and then deliver it to the children and teach it to the children and give them the instructions about how they should be teaching each other. We're going to explore all of this in greater detail soon, but I want to get through to the story. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, Rabbi Yehuda, the great leader who was the author of the Mishnah, he said in Hebrew, Kama gdolim masei Chia, how great are the deeds of Rabbi Chia. Rabbi Chia is the best. Such a compliment no one else got from Rabbi, at least in that measure. Rabbi Chia is doing something tremendous. Now, how great is Rabbi Chia? So Rabbi Yishmael, son of Rabbi Yossi, said to Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, are his deeds even greater than the master's? In other words, is he greater than you? You were his teacher. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi said to him, yes, my student Rabbi Chia is far greater than I am. Rabbi Yishmael persisted. Are they even greater than those of my father, Rabbi Yossi? Yehuda Hanasi said to him, heaven forbid. Such a statement shall not be heard among the Jewish people, that someone is greater than your father, Rabbi Yossi. Maybe he didn't want to mess with him. He didn't want to personalize it. About himself, he can say Rabbi Chia is greater than me, but he didn't want to chepa. It's a Yiddish word. He didn't want to shame him by saying he's greater than your father. So either he was, he didn't want to say so, or maybe he really wasn't. It's not for me and you to really have an understanding in levels of greatness of these people. But either way, the message is clear. Rabbi Chia was tremendously great, as his teacher said, even greater than himself, and surely due to his efforts of what he was doing to teach the children Torah. Let's continue. By the way, just something about Rebekah's grave. I don't want to go off topic, but Rebekah is so great, and that his gravesite eluded Reish Lakish. The Medrash says that a few generations later, Rav Huna wanted to be buried. He passed away, and the sages said he is worthy to be buried in the same cave as where Rebekah. Rebekah was buried in a cave, we don't know where, together with his two sons. Rav Huna was also deserving of being buried there. The question became, though, who's going to go and bury him there? Because who's allowed to enter into that cave to bury him there? So there was another rabbi, his name was Rabbi Chagi, and he said, I'm happy to go there and to be buried, and to bury Rav Huna there. Now, Rabbi Chagi was already an older person. He was 80 years old. The colleague said to him, we know why you want to go there, because you're already old. And maybe you won't be deserving, but you don't care, because if you're going to be punished by going in there, maybe for dying, you'll actually be very happy because you'll get to be buried there. You also want to be buried there. So he told him, no, I don't have any such personal interest. I'm just trying to do something for the honor of Rabbi Huna. And I'll do the following thing if you want. I'll tie a rope around me. You can hold this rope, a strong rope, and I'll go in there to bury Rav Huna, and then I will come out. And if I don't come out because I'm struck with death for being penalized for going in there, feel free to schlep me out. I don't have to stay in there. I'm not deserving of being there. So they said, that's a good plan. It says he walked in there to bury Rav Huna, and he was ashamed, or he was afraid to lift up his eyes and to see the gravesite of Rav Chia and his sons. But at some point, he couldn't contain himself. The temptation was too strong. He wanted to lay his eyes on the gravesite of the holy Rabbi Chia. We'll see soon some amazing things about his gravesite. So he lifted up his eyes to see Rav Chia's grave and his sons. Suddenly, it says, a voice came out from the heavens, from the grave, I don't know where from, and said, lower your eyes, which he immediately did. And he realized, this is not monkey business, this is real. And he came out. And it's recorded that as a reward for what he did, going to bury Rav Huna there, and as a reward for the honor that he had for Rav Chia in those graves, he was given the blessing that he lived to. He was 80 years old, he lived to 160, so his years were doubled. Amazing story. Now, let's continue to learn a little bit more about the greatness of Rabbi Chia. Rabbi Zera said, last night, Rabbi Yossi, son of Rabbi Chanina, appeared to me in a dream. They had amazing dreams. You and I don't have such dreams, but those holy people can communicate with souls in their dreams. So Rabbi Yossi appears, and I said to him, near whom are you placed in the upper realms? Where's your seat in heaven? He said to me, near Rabbi Yochanan. Yochanan, the great Rabbi Yochanan. And I asked, and who's Rabbi Yochanan near? He said, near Rabbi Yanai. And who's Rabbi Yanai near? Near Rabbi Chanina. And who's Rabbi Chanina near? Near Rabbi Chia. Rabbi Chanina was his colleague, if you recall. And he was near Rabbi Chia. Rabbi Chia was at the top. Rabbi Zera added, and I said to Rabbi Yossi, why is Rabbi Yochanan so low? So low. He's so distant in the line. Isn't he worthy of being placed near Rabbi Chia, the top of the line, the top of the row, the front row? So he said to me, in a place of fiery sparks and burning fires, who can bring Rabbi Yochanan, son of Nafcha, there? What does that mean? First of all, we're learning that the place, the grave, or the place in heaven of Rabbi Chia was surrounded by fiery sparks and burning fires, which means don't get too close. This is a holy space that most people are not welcome over here. Rabbi Yochanan could not be buried there. Why? So Rabbi Yochanan was the son of Nafcha. What does that mean? So Nafcha is a blacksmith, somebody who works with fire and sparks all the time. So it could be that he himself was a blacksmith, and that's why he's called the son of Nafcha. Maybe his father was a blacksmith. So somehow there's a play over here, and I'm not sure exactly, but Rabbi Yochanan, son of Nafcha, son of the blacksmith, should not get too close to the fire of Rabbi Chia. Okay, let's go further. Rabbi Chaviva said that Rabbi Chaviva bar Surmkai told me, strange names, Aramaic names, I once saw one of the sages whom Elijah the prophet would visit. Some sages were very great and they merited to have a visit from Elijah the prophet. As you've probably heard stories before, it's a real thing. You and I, we all get a visit of Elijah the prophet at the Brit Milah. He's there, and at the Seder table, he comes to drink his cup of wine, but we don't necessarily see it or understand it. We're not sensitive enough. But some people really get to see, to merit, to communicate with Elijah the prophet. So I once spoke to one of those sages, or I looked at one of those sages, and I noticed something strange. His eyes looked beautiful and healthy in the morning, but they appeared to be charred by fire in the evening. So I asked him, what's this phenomenon? Why are you like this? What's wrong with your eyes? And he said to me that I once told Elijah the prophet when he visited me, show me the sages upon their ascension to the heavenly academy. Take me to the heavens. I want to see all those sages, the way they get up in the morning and go up to the heavenly academy next to God, and they study and they pray and they sing and they bask in the glory of God's light. So Elijah said to me, you may gaze at all of them, I will show you them, except for those in the chariot of Rabbi Chia. Again, Rabbi Chia, you can't look at his chariot when he's ascending to heaven, to the heavenly academy, upon whom you may not gaze. He's too great for you to gaze at. Some things are too holy, like a bright sun. Some things you don't look at. It's not for you. Give it its private space. You're not deserving. It's not yours. It's not in your grasp. I asked Elijah, and what are the signs of Rabbi Chia's chariots? I'll know when not to look. There's going to be so many chariots of so many great sages ascending. Which one is Rabbi Chia's? So Elijah answered me as follows. Angels accompany all of the other sages' chariots as they ascend and descend, except for the chariot of Rabbi Chia, which ascends and descends of its own accord due to his greatness. Most sages, almost all of the sages, need angels to carry them up and bring them down, safe departure, safe arrival. They can't do it on their own. Rabbi Chia does not require any angel's help. He can go up, he can go down, he's in full control. He's deserving to go by himself. That's the greatness of Rabbi Chia. There's a beautiful commentary from the Kabbalistic commentator, the Orach Chaim, Reb Chaim ben Attar, from 4 or 5 centuries ago. And he writes about this. He says, the Torah says Im b'chukatai telechu, if you will follow in my laws and my statutes, says God, then I'll give you plenty of reward. V'natati geshmechem beitam, I'll give you the rains, I'll give in the summer, in the winter, I'll give you the perfect weather, you'll have plenty of prosperity. It's a strange word. Im b'chukatai telechu. The word telechu doesn't mean if you obey my laws, or if you listen to my laws, or if you fulfill my laws. Telechu from the root word of telech, holech, which means to go, to travel, to move. If you will move with my laws, with my commands, then I will reward you. Why such a strange word for obeying the word of God? So he draws on Rabbi Chia, a lesson from Rabbi Chia, and he says, there's different ways you can study Torah. You can study Torah, it's a mental exercise, you're enjoying it, you're comfortable, you're sitting with your legs up, you're smoking a cigar, you're sipping on some whiskey, and you're having a fun time. It's a little bit stimulating, it's interesting, you're exploring, you're listening, you're nodding off, you're falling asleep, you're taking a break. That's one kind of study of Torah. Or you can study Torah as such an immersive experience. You are applying yourself, mind, heart, and soul. You're immersing yourself in the words of the Torah, telechu, that the Torah actually moves you. You become a changed person after you've studied something. You don't just learn about something and then file it somewhere in your mind, and if it's more interesting, you keep it at the forefront so you can share it with someone else, and if it's less interesting, you file it back and you revisit it one day if you want to. It's not a filing thing. It's not just a mental exercise. You're studying because you want it to move you. You want it to change you. You want it to uplift you. You become a new person after you've studied something. When Rabbi Chia studied, and the way he studied was also the way that he communicated and conveyed that to his students, as we're going to soon find out, it moved him to the degree that even after he passed away, he didn't need chariot, he didn't need angels or others to help his chariot move, to carry him to the heavenly academy and bring him home. He could move on his own because his Torah was a moving Torah. His Torah already moved him in this world. He had that sense of movement, of energy, of passion, of enthusiasm, of interest, of excitement, of sincerity, that he himself was deserving to travel alone in his chariot to the heavenly academy and back. It's a powerful teaching about how we study Torah. It's not just reading a book. All right, last paragraph before we break this down. The sage relating this story. So this story, remember, it's the story of the sage telling Rebekah Grave about why his eyes were charred in the evening. So remember, he asked Rabbi Chia, I want to see the sages. Rabbi Chia said you can look at them all. You just can't look at the chariot of Rabbi Chia. And you'll know his chariot because it's traveling alone without angels. So this sage continued. As I was watching all of those sages ascend into heaven with their chariots being escorted by angels, I was unable to restrain myself. And I gazed upon Rabbi Chia's chariot. 2 fiery flames came and struck that man himself and blinded his eyes. Don't look where you're not supposed to. You did that? The fire came out. Again, fire coming out. We mentioned this earlier, and blinded his eyes. The next day, as a blind person, I went and I prostrated in Rabbi Chia's burial cave in supplication. I prayed and I said, Rabbi Chia, I'm deeply sorry. I made a huge mistake. I couldn't control myself. I was so tempted, but it was wrong. Please help me. Please send me a blessing to heal me. I said, I even actually sort of, what's the word? I tried to appeal to him and I said, I study the brightness of the master. I've studied all of your works. I care about you deeply. Please pray on my behalf. And he concludes, my vision was healed, but my eyes remained scorched. I got my vision back. My eyes were not completely healed. After a whole night's sleep, I guess there's enough fluids flowing in the eyes. He wakes up in the morning and the eyes are fresh and somewhat healthier. But as the day goes by, the eyes get more tired. And by evening time, his eyes are already charred. And that's the background to that story. This concludes this passage of the Talmud, which is a very intriguing passage. And of course, it brings us to trying to understand more about Rabbi Chia. What was so great about him? Why did Rabbi Chia feel like, and indeed, was greater than Rabbi Chanina. Rabbi Chanina also said he has incredible intellectual acumen. He could revive the Torah if necessary. Rabbi Chia said, I'm doing a much better job than you. I'm already keeping the Torah alive. And we learned about his efforts with the sowing and the planting and the trapping of the deers and preparing those books and the way he taught those students. And then we're learning that Rebbe says he's the greatest of the great, even greater than I am. And we're learning about all the stories about his gravesite and about where he's in heaven and about his chariot, how Rebbe Chia is clearly one of a kind, unmatched by anybody else. What is so great about Rebbe Chia? And we're going to learn and we're going to see, because Rabbi Chia was the master teacher. Rabbi Chia was the master disseminator, not just the master analyzer and student of Torah, but the master disseminator of Torah, who preserved Torah and who ensured that Torah will never be forgotten. That's the greatness of Rabbi Chia. How did he do it? First of all, a question. So Rabbi Chia has a deep passion to teach children. This is already something unique. A lot of teachers want to be a teacher in high school. I want to teach older kids. I want to be a professor in college. I want to teach adults. I want to shape the adult mind. Or I'm of the caliber, I'm intellectual, I'm intelligent enough that I can actually teach adults. School teacher of young children, yeah, we can get anybody to do that. Here's the textbook, here's the curriculum, go study and you can figure it out. And in many places or communities, it's not a job that people will run for. In fact, and this is a tragic thing, sometimes the person who becomes the teacher of the younger students is, and it's sad to say this, because they couldn't get a better job, because they couldn't get a different job. They aspired for more and then they settled for this. So the school settled on them for this. It's just the young children. It's just the second grade. You can teach them. We're not going to put you with the 9th grade, the 12th grade, the graduating class. We're not going to put you in college. Yeah, we can afford for second grade, third grade kids to spend a year with you. This is a big mistake. This is not the Jewish view. The Jewish view is, and we're going to learn this from Rabbi Chia, the greatest heroes in the Jewish community are the school teachers of young children. The Melamed in Cheder is the highest of the highest. Who should we be honoring as a community? Who should we be putting up at front on the dais? Not the Rabbi Chaninas, not the people that have accomplished so much with their own Torah study, and they've come up with the greatest ideas, and they themselves are masters of the whole Torah. They've finished the whole Shas, the whole Talmud, and maybe they've written a book or two, and they indulge, and they spend 18 hours a day studying Torah. They're also great people. They sacrifice their comforts, they sacrifice their lives to be able to study more and learn more. True. But there's a greater hero, the one that dedicates their time to go and teach the school children. In the Talmud, there's an old debate, who is greater, or what is greater? In the Talmudic terminology, the Oker Harim, or the Sinai. Oker Harim means one who can uproot mountains. Sinai is a mountain, a small mountain. The Oker Harim is somebody who excels in depth of Torah. The Sinai is somebody who excels in the breadth of their knowledge. They're not as deep as the others. They haven't delved comprehensively, analytically as deep as the uprooter of mountains. But they have Sinai, they have a greater depth, they have a broader knowledge of a lot of things, starting from the basics and a lot of information. And there's a long debate about this. Different rabbis excelled in different things. But when it comes to Rabbi Chia, we learn, unlike Rabbi Chanina. Rabbi Chanina was the uprooter of mountains. Rabbi Chia was one who sacrificed himself, dedicated himself and his life to being the Sinai, to being the one to share his knowledge with the children and empowering them to learn more on their own from each other. Let's figure out how. By the way, an amazing commentary. Rabbi Yehuda was the head of the academy. This was the teacher. After he was about to pass away, he appointed his successor. Who did he appoint? Rabbi Hanina, not Rabbi Chia. Rabbi Chia was the one that he said, how great is he? Rabbi Chia was the one that he said, he's even greater than me. He didn't appoint him to be the head of the academy. He appointed his colleague, the second great one. Great, of course he's great, but compared to Rabbi Chia, the second great one, he should be the head. Why? Let's look at Rabbi Chia, what he did. Let's ask a question about Rabbi Chia. Why did he have to do the whole thing from A to Z? Why did he have to purchase land, plow the field with flax, and then take the flax and make nets and hunt the deer and then kill the deer and give the meat to the orphans and then prepare the hides and then write the scrolls himself? He's a teacher. Why couldn't he go to a farm and purchase deer? Why couldn't he go to a farm and purchase hide? Why couldn't he go to a scribe to write the Torah scrolls and the Mishnah order? And then he's a teacher, let him raise the money, purchase these books, and go do what you want to do with those 5 kids and those 6 kids. Why do you have to do the whole thing yourself? So there's a very powerful lesson here. A true teacher of students, and especially we're talking about the teacher of Torah, the teacher of Judaism, Judaic values, Judaic traditions, Jewish practices. When you want to pass on the Jewish tradition to children, that education is holy. When King David says in Tehillim, Al tigu bimshichai, don't touch my anointed ones. Who's the anointed ones? You may think it's the Kohanim, it's the priests, it's the kings, it's the royal family. No. He says, Mishichai, says the Talmud, the anointed ones are Elu Tinokot Shabet Rabban. These are the children studying in the schools, studying Torah. They are the anointed ones. They are the ones that God considers holy. You want to see where God considers the children holy? Where did God choose to dwell his holy presence, his Shekhinah, in this world? In the temple. On the highest level, in the temple. And where in the temple? In the Holy of Holies. And where in the Holy of Holies? From the Ark. The Holy Ark, which had in it the Torah and the 10 Commandments and other things were in there. That holy space, which only one person, the high priest, once a year in Yom Kippur could enter that room. That's where God chose to rest the highest level of his Shekhinah, of his presence, and communicate with the people from there. And God instructs in the Torah to place 2 images, 2 keruvim or cherubim on top of that ark. And what were those 2 images? A young boy and a young girl, 2 children. You know where the holiest space is? The children who are connected with the Torah. You want to be able to educate them? You have to be holy also. When you walk into that classroom, or if you're a parent, when you walk into your home and you want to sit down with your child, you need to evaluate yourself. Are you deserving even to be educating your children? You're dealing with holiness. The Talmud says about children, they are, what's so unique about their Torah study? They are hevel she'en bahem chet, breath that has not experienced sin yet. An adult has experienced sin. An adult has a mature mind. Now, an adult can accomplish a lot. An adult should study a lot of Torah. An adult can understand much more than children can understand in Torah. But yet, the adult has a fiery Yetzer Hara in him, and he's thinking all kinds of other and distracting thoughts as well whilst he's studying or after he's studying or before he's studying. It's not pure when it's in the mind of an adult. But the Torah coming in the mind of a child or coming out of the mouth of a child, it's holy because they haven't tasted sin yet. The child is innocent. The child's naive. He hasn't seen. He hasn't heard. Hopefully, children are still like that today. A lot more exposure than once upon a time. But children innately are naive and innocent, and we should keep them that way. Gary, thank you. So you need to be in the right frame of mind. So the right frame of mind can mean you need to be present, you need to be focused, you need to be genuinely committed to your child right now. Put away your phone, put away distractions, put away your concerns, the emails you have to send, the calls you have to make, the work. No, be with your child. But more than just being with your child, you need to be in a holy, pure state. Because if you want to convey Torah and the tradition to your children, whether it's your child as a parent or whether it's your student, you need to be on a level of sanctity. You need to be altruistic. You need to be idealistic. You need to believe in them. You need to have hope in them. You need to recognize that they are God's children. Right on top of me, it says we're all God's children. That is true. But they, the children, are God's children in a very unique, holy way. And so here is the extent that Rabbi Chia taught us this. It's not just that when I purchase these curriculums and the Torah book and I take it to the classroom and I study with my students, that I have to be holy and sincere and committed and invested and genuine about what I'm doing. But all the preparations and every step involved in arriving at this moment of teaching needs to also be prepared and done with the utmost of purity. Rebbe Chia said, if I'm going to hold this Torah book, it needs to be a holy Torah book. How is it a holy Torah book? If it was prepared in a holy way. How is that? If I just go to a farm and purchase deer or purchase the hides, well, there's a whole business behind this. Somebody purchased the farm to make money. Somebody caught deer to make money. Somebody killed the deer and sold the meat to make money. And they tanned the hide to make money. And so this whole thing is a profitable business. I'm not saying anything wrong with that, but it doesn't have that altruistic holiness required for the educations of our children. And at the end of the line comes you and you purchase the book. And Rebbe Chia said, no. From the very beginning, I'm going to purchase the land in an altruistic way, not to make money. And plow the land and sow the seeds and harvest the flax and make the nets and catch the deer and kill the deer and sell the meat. I'm not going to sell the meat. I'm going to give the meat as a gift, as tzedakah, as charity to the orphans. All an act of a mitzvah and holiness. And I'm going to tan the hides for the sake of this. I'm going to write the scrolls for the sake of this. There's no money involved. There's no agenda involved. There's no profit involved. There's only altruistic, holy feelings involved. And with that, I'm ready to go and teach the children. So not just when you walk into the classroom. When you walk into the classroom, you for sure have to be the model that the children should see. They have to see that what's coming out of your mouth is something that's coming out of your heart and your mind. It's not that you're doing this because you're paid. You're paid to spend 5 hours with the child, so I'm going to teach you the curriculum. You have to be teaching you from your heart. You believe in it. You mean it. But it's more than that. At home, when you're preparing, when you're going to your studies, every step of the way, you have to be thinking about the child. Every step of the way, you have to think about the privilege and the responsibility that you have to be teaching this child and empowering a new child in our generation. So now, based on this idea, the Vilna Gaon says something amazing. Go back to our question before. Why did Rebbe not appoint Rabbi Chia to succeed him as the head of the academy? Why did he appoint Rabbi Chanina? And the Vilna Gaon explains, because Rabbi Chia had to stay and do what he was doing. What was he doing? He was teaching the children. You can't find others to teach children. You can find many teachers, many tutors to do what he's doing. To sow flax and catch deer. Other people can do that also. Let him serve the adult community and be the head of the academy. Rebbe said, no. Everything he's doing is an act of holiness, is altruistic. No one else can do it that way. And in addition to all these acts of altruism, the teacher himself needs to be the altruistic, holy, pure, committed, passionate, sincere teacher. There is nobody like Rabbi Chia to teach the children. I cannot find him a replacement. If I bring him to the academy and to lead the adults, the children will be neglected. And says Rebbe, the children come before the adults. So we need the greatest of the great. You could say it's a waste of talent. You take such a big talent and you put them with the children. It's not a waste of talent. You apply all your talent to the children in the classroom. Second best, put them in the academy, in the college for the adults. Amazing. So what did we learn from Rabbi Chia? We learned a number of lessons about education and about a teacher's role for a student. Rabbi Chia discovered, I'm going to go through a few points, additional over what we've already explained. Rabbi Chia discovered that the children are not studying is not for a lack of interest, but it's for a lack of accessibility. There were no books. There was no printing press. Rabbi Chia said, I know they're interested. We have to make it available to them. And available to them in ways that they can access on their level, in their language. It's a powerful idea. Because we as teachers, we as rabbis, we as parents, we as members of the community need to realize this. There's a lot of interest out there. Everyone wants to learn about life. Everyone wants something meaningful and purposeful in their life. But are we creating the proper many channels of access for them to get into it? Or are we restricting? You have to, or even in the schools, this is the mold and you have to sit in your chair as follows, and this is the old model, and either you're in or you're out. No, you have to be creative. How to reach every single child in their unique, special way. How to reach every adult nowadays. Maybe it's in the synagogue, maybe it's in the study hall, maybe it's in their home, maybe it's in the park, maybe it's using a text, maybe it's singing a song. Whatever you do, find the language and find the means to reach that person and give them access to the Torah and to the tradition and to their own heritage. Next, Rebekah, as a great teacher, could have said, I'm a wonderful teacher. I'm going to sit in my holy throne and I'm going to wait for everybody to sign up to my course. Come on, it's out there online. Here's the link. Everybody sign up. Well, everyone should sign up, but it doesn't work that way. And if you're waiting for all the students to sign up and come to your course, who's going to come? Don't wait for people to come to you. You go out to the people. You go out to the streets. You find the students. You show them how much you care about them and how much you love them. And you reach out to their world, meet them where they are. Don't ask for them to come where you are. Rebekah went from city to city to city. You could say it's disrespectful for a person to have to live in that kind of way, but he wanted to because he had a clear agenda. He wants to be able to teach more Torah. Next, look at the way he taught the children. There's so many amazing lessons here. Listen to this one. In the old model, we used to talk about frontal learning. I'm going to speak, you're going to listen. Listen, absorb, write it down, and goodbye. It's not how we teach anymore, because that's not how people learn. Rebekah taught one book of Torah to this child, the second to the second child, 5 to the 5 children, 6 children. But then he said, children, once you've mastered your book, I want you to speak to each other. I want child 1 to teach his book to the rest. Child 2, teach your book to the rest. I want to have dialogue. I want you to talk to each other. I want you to learn from each other. I want you to study with each other. I want you to challenge each other. I want you to live with each other. Don't just accept it from me, the teacher. You acquire the knowledge and use the peer-to-peer, use your colleagues to be able to bounce off each other and learn from each other and grow with each other. And think about that experience when child 1 taught the rest of the books to the rest of the children. Most of them were learning that book for the first time. Now they know 2 books. Child 2 was teaching, now they know 3 books. And as it's going along, when child 9 is teaching the rest of the other 11, now they all know 9 books of the Torah. Their Torah knowledge is very vast. Now when they're absorbing and learning a new book, could you imagine the level of the conversation, the level of how advanced they all are and how they can stimulate each other and help crystallize the knowledge and excel. So when you finish the exercise and they've been taught each other everything they know, and they're all absorbed everything. And you know what they're ready to do now? And this is key. Teach a student in a way that they don't just remain a student. They don't just remain dependent on the teacher always. If a teacher teaches, I know it. If they don't teach it to me, then I don't know it. And I'll wait for the teacher to teach me. I don't know. I have to wait to be taught. No. Give them the skill to become a teacher as well. When you can take a student and educate them in a way and empower them with the knowledge, with the skills, with the confidence, with the blessings to go and teach another, so the student becomes a teacher, now you've succeeded. Now you've empowered somebody. They own it, they care for it, and they're ready to spread it to somebody else. And when you create that kind of atmosphere and that kind of network, you have transformed an entire group, and you've transformed in that way an entire generation. These were the tools that Rebekah was using. And so, Gary, I hope I'm answering some of your questions, and then we'll come to it also further. And so, now we come back to something amazing. The original story. Reish Lakish is looking to mark all the graves, and he finds all the graves except for Rebekah's. Why? So the simple answer we said, because Rebekah was too great. Reish Lakish is undeserving. There's a deeper answer over here. Listen carefully. The difference between Rabbi Chia's model and another model. Another model is the person who wants to sit in their ivory tower, who wants to be an excellent scholar, who wants to be able to dedicate a lot of time to themselves, to be able to study and grow and master knowledge. It's very important. The community needs academics and it needs scholars, and we need those books written. It's true, we need them. We're just suggesting it's not the highest order, and it's not the person you want to put in front of your children, and it's not the way you ultimately preserve Torah and tradition. When a person sat in their ivory tower a whole life, and they built scholarship, and they became a renowned academic, a brilliant person, amazing. So after 120 years, and when they pass away, and everything they know goes together with them. And they're almost like forgotten. I mean, maybe they taught, but them and everything they've owned and they've achieved has passed on together with them. But when you're like Rabbi Chia, and you dedicate yourself to knowledge for the sake of being able to disseminate and being able to teach and reaching out to the children and educating them in the ways that we've described, with that holiness and that commitment, and setting up that model of children becoming students and then becoming teachers and peers and talking to each other, and you've created that whole vibe of education, even after you pass away, you live on. Because look at the next generation, and look at the way they're excelling, and look at their interest, and look at their passion, and look at the way they're connecting, and look at the way that they're passing it on to the next generation. It's all a result of your efforts. So even when you pass on, you're still alive. The name Rabbi Chia, what's the name? Chia means chai, chayim, alive. Reish Lakish, this is a symbolic idea, a metaphoric idea. Reish Lakish could not find the grave of Rabbi Chia because the grave didn't exist. The physical grave existed. But the Rebekah Chia that he's looking for, that teacher, that master, is alive. Just look at all the students and look at all the great, keen, observant, connected, faithful Jewish people, and you say, I'm looking at the efforts of Rebekah Chia in front of me. It's a result of his work. So he never really died. And a teacher who takes students and turns them into teachers also never dies. I want to conclude with something timely. Yesterday was the yahrzeit of Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Schneerson. He was the father of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson. Now, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak was an unbelievable person, a great Talmid Chacham, a profound Kabbalist. He wrote a lot of Sfarim. He ended up being the chief rabbi of Yekaterinoslav, or today in Russia, it would be, in Ukraine, it would be Dnipropetrovsk. Try to say that. Today there's actually a rebuilt Jewish community there, but he was the chief rabbi. And we have countless stories, not just about his great scholarship. And if you look at his writings, and they're deep and they're difficult to decipher and they're cryptic, and the person knew everything. And he knew how to explore and expand and go deep. He was brilliant. And there's a lot of work today in disseminating and in deciphering his teachings. But more than that, we have so many stories about his commitment to the community, his commitment to the education of the students in the yeshiva, his commitment to helping the community in every need they have. Stories about baking matzah for Pesach and providing the shofar for Rosh Hashanah and the etrog and the love for Sukkot. And this is at a time where these things were highly unavailable or highly outlawed. And his mesirat nefesh, his self-sacrifice to be committed to help people. He could have been, if he would have just stayed on his own in his own ivory tower, he would have become even greater than he already was. You know, sometimes when he used to teach, he used to start teaching, and then the students were listening, and we were in the room. But after the first 5 minutes, they understood. The next 5 minutes, they started to lose him, and 5 minutes later, everybody lost him. Nobody can understand him sometimes. He was too deep, he was too profound. But he, more than that, wanted to reach everybody in their level, to include them in the community. Just a funny story, not a funny story, but an amazing story. So he had 3 sons. One of those sons was Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, the Lubavitcher Rebbe. When he was a young child, so Rabbi Levi Yitzchak was teaching, in the room. And again, at some point in the class, everybody lost him. It was too deep. It was too profound. And at one point, one of the people sitting there said, Rebbe, what are you saying? Who are you teaching? Keiner versteht nicht. Nobody understands what you're saying. So he smiled, and he turns to a child in the back of the room, and he says, so da eine was versteht. There's one person that understands what I'm saying. That was his young son, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, who became the Lubavitcher Rebbe. He understood. But Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Schneerson is a reminder a little bit about the efforts of Rabbi Chia. First of all, towards the end of his life, at the height of his career as a great chief rabbi, he was arrested by the NKVD, by the Soviets, for the crime of teaching and spreading Torah, for the crime of building Jewish community. And he was sent off to exile in Kazakhstan, a place near a city called Almaty. And there he was exiled. He had to live there, and there was the physical conditions were depraved, and there was no, he was already older, there's no medicine available, no running water, food was scarce, and he was living amongst a bunch of people that had no interest in him, and I mean, his whole identity was collapsed. Terrible, terrible sentence. And in the end, by the way, that's where he ended up passing away. He got so sick and he passed away in exile, away from his family, away from anybody that knew him. A very tragic ending to his life. So much so, he passed away in 1954. So much so that his son, the Rebbe, had not seen him for a very long time, since before his wedding, since the 20s, he hadn't seen him. But once somebody brought a picture to the Lubavitcher Rebbe of his father months before he passed away. Here's a picture of your father. And the Rebbe was shocked. And he asked the question, that's my father? He didn't recognize him because his face had changed. He was so gaunt. He was so pained. He was from hunger and from disease and from illness. A terrible, tragic ending to a great tzaddik's life. And that's the sacrifices that these tzaddikim made in those days. But when he was there, what was he interested in? What did he want to do? He was yearning to be able to study Torah, to teach Torah, and to write Torah. He had no pen. He had no paper. He had nothing. His wife, Rabbetzin Chana, was such a great woman and such a wonderful wife. She used to go out to the field and pick berries or leaves with certain dyes and create a dye which would serve as a ink. And then he would have like a quill or something, and she would make these things for her husband so he'd be able to write his Torah commentary that he wanted to teach everybody. All he had was a few books with him. And to those few books, he wrote all over the margins, on the side of the page, on top of the page, between the lines. And we have those books today, you could see all different colors. There's red, and there's blue, and there's green, and there's black, and depending on the dye, the way that his wife made the ink. That's all he wanted to do. He wanted to be able to teach and share, even when he was living the most difficult of situations in life. But he taught some lessons from Rabbi Chia. He also quoted a passage from the Zohar. The Zohar says also something amazing about Rabbi Chia. Rabbi Chia had many different kinds of students. You know, some professors, some teachers, they're very selective about what kind of students can enter their classroom. You have to get certain grades and certain scores and certain marks. And if you're able to understand what I'm doing and what I'm saying, and you have a future, so it's worth investing in you, then you're welcome to my classroom. But if it's not worth investing in you, I don't want to waste my time, you're not welcome. And some schools are like that, and some yeshivot are like that, and it's an issue. He wasn't like that at all. The Zohar says he had three kinds of students. He had students that their Torah study was lishma. Their Torah study was for the sake of learning. They were very sincere and devout. He had Torah students that were not so sincere, not so devout. They learned, and they weren't maybe so altruistic in their learning. But he even had students that were completely shalol lishma. He had students that were completely disinterested or distracted with other things. The Zohar says that he had a student that one day he walks into the room and he sees his face is green. Whether this is really green, physically green, or metaphorically green. And he looks at him, and when he looks at him, he's able to read his mind, read his heart. And he says, I see that you're thinking sinful thoughts. And he's thinking sinful thoughts, which is making you conflicted inside. And what are you going through and where you're distracted and where do you want to be? You're not interested in being here. You're not up to par. He did not tell him, get up and walk out of my classroom. You don't belong here. There's no hope in you. He called over that student and he had a talk with him and he brought him to his house and he wanted to bring him back and teach him the love of the Torah and the love of connecting with Hashem and how to control these impulses and not be distracted by sinful thoughts and be able to truly altruistically connect with what we're doing over here. He dedicated himself to even this one singular student, which he could have sent flying. So Rabbi Levi Yitzchak learns from Rebekah so many lessons about a teacher. Number one, don't be so selective. Let more students in your classroom. Not students that are going to distract the learning. That's a disciplinary thing. But even students who are not up to par. And I'm talking especially about Torah learning and Judaic studies. Other classes, we can think about the models for them. Even if a student is not up to par, bring him into the classroom and make him up to par. You have a job ahead of you. You want it to be easy? You want them just to lick up your knowledge without any work at all? Put yourself in their shoes, invest yourself, care about a child. Which leads to the next point. It's one thing teaching 20 children and modeling your class after the average and throwing one box of knowledge and everyone has to get it somehow. No, it's more than that. Pay attention to the individual needs of a student. No student is on the same page. No student has the same IQ. No student is coming from the same background, the same home, the same experiences. Every student is dealing with different things in their mind, different things in their heart. Every student has their fears and their lack of self-esteem and their issues that are wearing them down. Give yourself the opportunity to enter into their lives, to feel what they're going through. Have a sincere interest in not just teaching them, but that they should learn and they should be able to grow from what you're teaching them and to become masters and mentors as a result of your efforts. And finally, he makes a very important point. Remember, we said the word in the Talmud when Reish Lakish was told that you indeed engaged in pilpul, you engaged in Torah analysis like Rebekah, but you didn't engage in being marbitz, in disseminating Torah like Rebekah. The word is marbitz. Marbitz is an interesting word. Marbitz is also used when you nurture a garden, when you water a garden. So it's for spreading, disseminating, but it's also for nurturing. The garden is a place of pleasure. The garden is a place where you can see things grow if you apply the right effort and the right patience. And what the message to Reish Lakish was, you want to know what's unique about Rebekah? When he walked into a classroom, he wasn't walking into a battle zone. He wasn't walking into a cold space where he said, here I've got to do my job 9 to 5 and then walk out and finally catch a breath after teaching these students. He felt like he was walking into a garden. He looked around him and he saw budding saplings. He saw seed. He saw so much potential. He saw the ability that they should grow and become each one a different plant, each one more beautiful than the other, a different color flower. But if you water them properly and you nurture them properly and you care for them properly and you tend to their needs, you will see the beautiful garden flowing from here. That's the perspective a teacher has to have when walking into a classroom. To conclude one final teaching, we said earlier about the holiness of children. And we said that the Shekhinah, God's resting place, in the Holy of Holies in the temple, was in the space where children, the cheruvim, the young children statues, were connected with the Torah inside the Holy Ark. Shekhinah, the word Shekhinah, which is God's presence, can make two words, Shochen, Yud, and Hey. Yud and Hey is God's name. It's the first two letters of God's four-letter name. The four-letter name is Yud, then Hey, then Vav, then Hey. Shochen Ka. Here God rests. Now, in this four-letter word of God, name of God, there's the Yud K and the Vav K. The Yud K is the higher order of God, is the godly reality as it exists in a higher plane. The godly reality as it is in the world of truth, the way everything it appears in heaven. Vav-K, the second two letters of God's name, is the way that truth trickles down and manifests itself in a world like ours, in a world filled with falsehood, corruption, greed, selfishness, and veils, coverings over the truth of Hashem and the truth of creation. So Yud K is godliness revealed in its awesome glory. Vav K is the way it is enclosed in the trappings of our world. Or like your soul, the way it's in heaven, and then the soul, the way it comes down through the body. And the Yud K Vav K is the blend. If you're able to bridge that gap, if you're able to draw down and express and realize those real truths, not just when you're meditating, not just when you're in a higher plane, not just when you're praying in the synagogue, not just on a holy day, not just in the temple, but when you're able to go outside the temple, into the real world, and you're going to your office or to your home or to the many distractions. And if there you can realize and manifest and bring with you and exercise those truths in that darker space, you've created the bridge of Yud K and Vav K, which is the real truth about God. So here's something amazing. The children naturally are Yud K. Children are Yud K. Children more than adults. Children have access to truths more than adults do. When we study about truths of God, truths of creation, the truths that the Torah teaches us about divine providence and about faith and the truth of what really is going on in this world, we study it, we understand it, but we struggle with it because we have other thoughts and we have questions and we have doubts and we've studied different things, conflicting things from other places. Maybe we may feel that science may be a conflict, even though it should not be. So as adults, we're never purely Yud K. That element of godly truths in our world is never in its full glory in our life because it's always clouded by the thoughts and other distractions that we have. But children are not like that. Children don't have those clouding of the mind. Children are innocent and pure. Sometimes we say, I'm a little nervous to teach my child a certain truth. Are they going to understand it? Your child understands it more than you understand it. When you teach a child the truth about God and the truth about Torah and the truth about life, even if you're skeptical about it and you have doubts about it, but the child gets it. They get it more than you do. Which is why we have to be ready to and confident enough to teach it to the children and recognize that they have clarity more than we do sometimes. The child is Yud K. It's a walking, revealed, open presence of the truthful God here in this world. We have to respect them that way. And then Rabbi Chia comes along and he teaches the 5 books of the Torah and the 6 books of the Mishnah to the children. 5 and 6 make 11. 11 is the numerical value of Vav and He, the second 2 letters of God's name, the Vav He. He wanted to teach these children, and he said, "You're like a sponge, correct, Gary? And I'm gonna give you everything. I'm not gonna stop. Even if I have doubts about something, I'm gonna give it to you because you're gonna get it. You're wiser. You're more spiritually sensitive than I am. You're the Yud K. But I want to ensure that you're empowered and you have the skills and the knowledge that when you grow up and when you mature and when you become a more free-thinking person, when you become an adult, you'll be able to have the Vav K also. You'll be able to connect your truths with your mature life later on in this world. No matter what you get up to, no matter your experiences, no matter your challenges, no matter your career, no matter where you're going to go, no matter what kind of lifestyle you choose, and all the difficulties that come with that, it should not weigh you down. You should pick up your surroundings. You should elevate your experiences so that you will be the Yud K with the Vav K, and you will have a wholesome, holistic, pure, unbreached, unbreakable connection with God, with the Torah, with our tradition, with yourself, with your true self, with your soul. That is the result of a good education. So my friends, that's what we learn from Rabbi Chia. It's not easy to be a parent. It's not easy to be a teacher. We shouldn't relegate those things to the people that can't get another job. We should be training and teaching teachers and parents who are the best in our society because we're putting into their hands the golden, beautiful, precious souls of our children. I want to wish all the teachers good luck. Hashem should be with you. Hashem should bless your efforts. We thank you for your unbelievable dedication teaching our children, whether it's going to be in person in the classroom this year, whether it's going to be on the Zoom, which makes things all the more challenging that we know that. However it is, God should bless your ways, and you should see the fruits of your efforts. And you should see these children grow up to becoming pious, respectful, honest, sincere, devout, faithful adults, exactly as you educated them to be. Good luck, good night, my friends, and God bless you.